Hello, hello. Welcome to Dr. Toomer Talks on Tuesday. Thank you for joining me. For those of you who are listening for the first time, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer. I'm a family medicine and community health physician, and I'm founder of Total Weight Care Institute, where I help people who feel a little overwhelmed find complete and compassionate weight care, either for themselves as physician or as physicians who want to provide compassionate and complete weight care for their patients. So, welcome today, and I'm going to be talking about Ozempic. I know that I talk a lot about GLP-1s, partly because I have been prescribing them for a very, very long time. I've been on a GLP-1 for almost 10 years. I've been prescribing them for off and on label for over 10 years. And so I'm very knowledgeable and I get a lot of questions about them. I will be talking about other topics, I promise. All you have to do, if you want me to talk about something, please send me a message with suggestions or ask them here. At the end, I will have an opportunity for you to ask me questions. If there's some that come up and they are sort of fit into the order that I'm speaking, then I'll stop and I'll answer. But for right now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Ozempic. So, hello everyone who's joining. I appreciate you coming in. So you can watch this live now, or you can watch it later. And if you do, please put in hashtag replay. Also, follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Toomer, or to blackdoctor.org, which is self-explanatory, blackdoctor.org, and share with other people. So please, follow and subscribe so that we can get the word out. So I want to talk about Ozempic, the good, the bad, and the truth. Because as we say, there's always three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth. Well, it's the same thing with these medications. There are those who believe in them, those who don't, who just love them to death. And then there's really the truth in between. And so what Ozempic is, and the reason I say Ozempic seems to be the catch-all name for all of the GLP-1 receptor agonists. It's sort of like how we say Band-Aid for every Band-Aid that we use, regardless of the brand. And so it's sort of the same thing. And so I when I say Ozempic, I'm really talking about all GLP-1 receptor agonists, because they all do about the same thing. And so what Ozempic is a glucagon-like protein, and it's a receptor agonist. And what those do mean is that they act on cells or cell receptors that regulate the motility of our gut, meaning that how food goes from our mouth all the way through until we pass it out as waste. And so all of that's done through different types of movements, different types of actions. All of it is mechanical. There's a mechanical part. That is, it slows that down. So what happens if it slows it down? When you eat, your stomach feels full, it stretches, and that sends a message to your brain that says, hey, I've eaten, I can stop now. That's called satiety. And so when satiety happens, you stop eating. And so naturally you eat less if you're more, if you are someone who's very much in tune with their own cues, their own body cues. Now, some people can override that cue. Even when their body and their brain says, okay, I'm full, they can still keep eating. And that happens sometimes. So even though these medications work really well for that, they don't work for everybody for that. And when people say, so that is the one mechanical part, that's the one part that if there is an underlying metabolic process, and I'll talk about that also, that's the only part that can help someone who doesn't have a disease lose weight on it. And even that is even temporary. And it's very little weight loss given what happens when a metabolic process is being treated. The other thing is that ultimately is that it treats the low end of diabetes. It is a metabolic regulator. It is a hormonal regulator. So what it does is anytime in the body there is a problem with how the body metabolizes glucose, metabolizes carbohydrates, then these medications act on that process. Diabetes is also a glucose dysregulatory process. That's why these medications are diabetic medications, and they help with the cause of weight gain. They're not really weight loss medications. They just affect the cause of weight gain. And the reason we gain weight is our body is maladaptive in how it creates fat using the food we eat. And that food that it makes it from is carbohydrates. When we eat protein, that protein goes to make body structures. When we eat fat, it goes to make hormones. It's when we eat carbohydrates that our body then makes fat from it. And when our body is maladaptive to do that, it gets very efficient at making fat, and it doesn't make fuel as efficiently. And so our muscles, all the things in our body that help us, that give us energy, are now competing with the process that's pushing everything towards fat. And so that's what they do. So they stop that process. And also what they do is so they control the metabolic process that makes our body want to make fat out of food instead of fuel. And so what it does is it makes the cells of the body more sensitive to insulin. Insulin resistance is at the low end of diabetes. Diabetes is at the high end. They're all glucose dysregulatory processes. When insulin resistance happens, it's very hard to test for it. We often don't see it. And the only way we know it's there is because we see the most obvious symptom. And that most obvious symptom is fat production, or what we call weight gain. When the body gains weight very easily and is very resistant to losing it, it is pretty much a sign that there is insulin resistance there. And that's why these medications work so well to help people lose weight, because they stop the cause of weight gain and therefore reverse it. So that is the first and foremost, because that's why they work so well. And that's what they do. But why is it so important to then treat these things? Why do we go after treating people who are gaining weight, who are overweight, and who have obesity? We treat it because those things go on to become worse things if we do not treat them, and we don't treat them early. Anyone who has pain can tell you, like when you treat a headache, when you first start to notice that you're getting pain, it's very easy to take medication to make it go away. But when you have a full-blown painful headache, it's much, much harder. Anyone who has migraines can tell you it's much easier to stop a migraine than it is to make it go away once you've got it. It's the same thing with glucose dysregulation. If you treat it early, it will stop it from getting worse. And so the only sign we have that it's happening is the symptom of weight gain or fat production. And that's why we treat it. This also, and for me, I also do this with anyone who's gaining weight unexpectedly and all of the sudden. I don't wait till they become overweight or wait until they become obese before doing something about it. If there's a way that we can use a low dose glucose GLP-1 medication, then why not? And especially like in perimenopausal women, it's very, very effective in stopping the weight gain of menopause, mainly because the reason we gain weight during menopause is the same reason we gain weight with insulin resistance. Menopause causes insulin resistance, which again means that the insulin our body uses to then regulate our glucose suddenly is no longer working very well. And so these medications make our cells sensitive. Think of them like glucose is like a key, and think of it like a key to a house. If that key goes, just imagine if you turn the key to a house, suddenly it opens the door. And when it opens the door, anything can come in. Well, it's the same thing with insulin in our body. But what happens when we have insulin resistance is either the key doesn't fit, it's rusty and it won't turn, and the door won't open. And so all these people are outside banging on the house saying, let me in, let me in. Well, that's essentially what happens. So when that happens, instead of getting into the house, what they do is they congregate and start causing a whole lot of problems. They create a riot, essentially. And that's what happens in the body. Our body then creates fat, and that fat creates a riot and causes all sorts of problems and all sorts of destruction. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So that's why it's so important then to treat these things. Not to mention the psychosocial damage. We know about the biological damage, but there's psychosocial damage as well. The psychosocial damage that happens often can lead to societal's reaction to what is considered a thing not to have. Now, society has said that thinness is currency. Society has said that they have assigned importance to thinness, whether it's healthy thinness or not. And then society says, well, you have to do all these really impossible and hard things in order to have this privilege. Well, now all of a sudden, we don't have to do all these hard and impossible things to have that privilege, because the reason why we didn't have the privilege is now being treated. Because all of a sudden, wait a minute, it's not discipline. It's not willpower. It's not because I'm eating too much. It's because my brain has glucose dysregulation. Our brain uses glucose to function. So everything our brain does that controls the rest of our body is based on what our body does with carbohydrates and glucose. And these medications now regulate that. So you're no longer craving carbohydrates. It's no longer driving your appetite. It's no longer affecting moods. So that's why these medications are so wonderful, because they do all these things. They regulate mood, because suddenly the blood sugar in your brain that's giving you depression isn't happening anymore. The blood sugar dysregulation in your brain that's causing anxiety isn't happening anymore. That's what GLP-1s do. They regulate all of that. And that's why they do such a lot of good. So, but how do they work? One of the ways is they block, like I said, they block the body's maladaptation to different hormonal levels. Cortisol being one of the biggest, a drop in estrogen is another, and insulin being overly used, overly produced, and then not being used properly is another. And so that's why they work so well. But why it's also important, though, that when our body makes fat, that those fat cells in and of themselves become their own organ. It puts out its own hormone. One of those hormones is helpful, is called leptin, and what that does, it drops our appetite. But there's other things that it puts out that aren't helpful. One of those things they're called cytokines. They're little chemical messages that go around the body that tell the body how to do certain things and what to do in certain situations. Well, those little cytokines cause inflammation. Inflammation causes all sorts of issues. Like I talked about last week, inflammation of small vessels causes strokes, causes dementia, causes kidney failure, causes heart attacks, causes all sorts of immune issues, causes the skin not to heal as well. It causes all sorts of issues. It affects reproduction. It affects, it also leads to cancers, which is one of the reasons why obesity and cancer are connected. It's because these chemicals that our fat cells give off wreak havoc in the body. So remember when I was saying how if the key doesn't work and it's rusty and you've got this big crowd outside and they start getting unruly, they start causing problems. That's essentially what happens in the body with fat cells. You've got all this stuff sitting there waiting, and it just starts causing all sorts of issues in the body. So what if we don't do anything? We're just like, I'm sorry, body positivity. I just want to be, fat and happy, and that's fine. I'm not, I say this, and I say this as someone who was 100 pounds heavier before. So it's not like I'm just trying to be, mean, but I have lost over 100 pounds myself. So I know both sides of this. So one of the things that happens is we tend to blame ourselves for the way things are. We tend to internalize and self-incriminate. And so what that does is it actually creates a bad psychosocial mechanism in a vicious cycle that causes hormonal changes. Those hormonal changes cause our disease state to get worse. Our disease state gets worse because of our moods, and we just keep going and going and going and going, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse unless something stops it. And that's what these GLP-1s do. They stop that. They break that cycle. And that's why they're so important. But it's also very important because of the psychosocial societal feelings that are imposed on those of us who are overweight or have been obese or have obesity, it often leads to isolation. It often leads to low self-esteem. And both of those lend themselves, loneliness, low self-esteem. That's a dangerous combination when you're trying to protect yourself. And so you think, oh, what difference does it make? Well, it makes a huge difference. So that's why these medications are so good, because they can actually save someone's life, not just biologically, but they can save their life psychosocially as well. And I'm not saying that thinness is everything. It's not. And to be honest, losing weight isn't anything. It's not. Losing fat, however, is healthy. It does reverse health processes, and everybody's body goes to a different place when they get healthy. You just get healthy, let your body go where it goes, and for every single person, it is different. There is no one size fits all, and health doesn't have a size. So it's just important to be as healthy as you can for you and let your body go where it goes, and then enjoy it and accept it and love it wherever you are. So why the negativity around these medications? Well, we hear a lot about the complications of the medications. Well, one, these medications were designed and developed for diabetics. Diabetics have some of the worst complications in their disease state of any of diseases out there. So you have visual changes, you have brain fog changes, you have gastroparesis, that stomach paralysis, you have circulatory issues. So of course, if you have a population that has these things as part of their disease, and then you use a drug for that disease, often they get connected and they're not. The drug doesn't cause these issues. What they might do is make these issues worse in someone who already has them because of their disease state. So when we see gastroparesis is not subtle at all. And so if anybody's having, nausea, intractable vomiting, meaning vomiting they can't get rid of, that's a sign something's wrong and that medication needs to be stopped. But often what happens, what we see is either the medicine being given to someone inappropriately, we see that medication not being monitored, or we see the person using the medication inappropriately or knowing that they're having problems and just not stopping it until it's just simply too late. And so that's why we see these complications and then we assign them to the medicine. And like I said at the beginning, we tend to call all of these medications Ozempic, regardless of what they are, whether they're inappropriately made compounds, whether they are medications that are given at too high of a dose, whether they are any of the, what do I call the lower end of the medications, the old formulations of different medications that had higher side effect with them. And so, but they all get lumped in together. But the other thing that happens is that there is, because of the thin privilege, because of the thin currency in many parts of the world, there's a sense of desperation when it comes to weight loss. And that desperation lends itself to maladaptive behaviors around weight loss. And those maladaptive behaviors get projected onto the medications. And that means that just like you have people who will starve themselves to be thin, they will misuse a medication to be thin. Just as you will see someone who will eat some really extreme and malnourishing diet, they'll do the same when it comes to the medications just to be thin. And so what you see is a process, a maladaptive social process, and these medications are being used to perpetuate that, and then they're being blamed for it, when those behaviors were here long before those medications were on the market. And so unfortunately, what happens is that it allows for people to have their biases and their prejudices projected onto a medication, and it's justified because we see how maladaptively they are used. And that can cause an issue. But that doesn't mean the medications are bad. It just means that they're used badly. And so when I say the good, the bad, and the truth, the good is they do a lot of good. The good is when they're used properly, they're managed properly, they're appropriately used, and they're appropriately prescribed for the right people who need them. And when I say need them, that means a metabolic issue, whether it's diabetes or on the other end of insulin resistance, which most people don't know they have. The only thing they see is their weight gain. That weight gain in and of itself is a metabolic process. You can't make fat without hormones and without some other metabolic process going on. It just doesn't happen. That's how the body works. That's how human physiology works. Okay. And so that's the good. It really does reduce disease. It reduces all the secondary problems that we see with fat production, like cancers, like inflammation, bone and joint issues, brain, mood issues. All of that is well controlled with these medications, with Ozempic and all the other GLP-1s. The bad, when they're misused and they're abused, they are badly created, because there are some compounds out there that are horrible. They're more like poison than they are the medication, but there's also some very, very good ones that are being brushed with the same, that are being, what's the phrase I'm looking for? They are painted with the same brush because of their badness, but there's some good ones out there too. And then those, of course, like you said, diet culture is such, people are going to abuse processes all the time. They always have. And now they're using these medications to do them. But the truth is, when they are prescribed properly, when they are monitored correctly, when they are used properly, they are safe, they are effective, and they are life-saving. So I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer, family medicine and community health physician, and I'm a weight care specialist and the founder of Total Weight Care Institute. And so, like I said, if you want to hear more about anything health and wellness related, please send me a message and tell me what topics you'd like to hear more of, and follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel, blackdoctor.org YouTube channel. And I will see you next week, every week at 6 p.m. Now, I'm going to say next week I will be traveling, so I may have a pre-recorded video, but you can trust it's going to be just as good, I promise. So I will go through some of the messages and see if I can go back to some of the upper ones first and find them. I'm going to go, if I go up to the top, let's see here. So I have some good evenings from Chris. Thank you, Chris, for coming. Hello. And let's see. The first question, is Wegovy in the same category? Yes. Wegovy and Ozempic are exactly the same medication. The only difference is their name and in how they're dosed. Ozempic is semaglutide. That's its generic name. Wegovy's generic name is semaglutide. They're exactly the same medicine, created and produced by the same company. The only difference is Ozempic is been assigned for diabetes. Wegovy has been assigned for weight loss, and their dosing is slightly different. For Ozempic, it is 0.25, 0.51, 1.7, No, sorry, 1 and then 2. That's for Ozempic. For Wegovy, it is 0.25, 0.51, 1.7, then 2.4. So for obesity, anti-obesity treatment, it is a slightly higher dose, and they just kind of add another layer in there. So they are exactly the same. So, um, why don't doctors offer this as a choice rather than weight loss surgery? Doctors have made a lot of money from weight loss surgery. Well, there's your answer. If you ask a surgeon what to do for something, they're going to tell you need surgery. If you come to me for weight loss, I can't tell you you're going to need surgery, because I can't tell you I'm going to do your surgery, because I can't. I don't do weight loss surgeries. However, in their defense, not all doctors, we did not learn about weight loss in medical school. The only thing we learned about was weight loss surgery, was bariatric surgery. There was a time when really that was the only option. Now that we have these medications, however, those surgeries are not as necessary. However, medicine is always slow to change. It's very slow to change the protocols. It's very slow to change standards of care. And that's what's happening with these medications. They are slow. And so the reason many doctors don't offer this as a choice is because they don't know how to offer it as a choice. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do, to teach physicians how to use this. And hopefully our med school education will change, and therefore more and more doctors will feel comfortable. The other thing that happens, unfortunately, in medicine, we are an apprentice system. So whatever biases and prejudices our teachers have, it gets passed down to subsequent generations of physicians. And since we aren't taught a lot about weight loss, we don't know. The other is our own biases and prejudices against obesity also comes into play. And that just comes into play across the board, which is why it is always shown, every study has shown, that when you go to a physician who most represents who you are, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether you're old or young, whether whatever your race, your socioeconomic level, whoever is most representative of who you are as a person, that is going to be, you're going to have a better outcome with that physician. And that studies have just shown this over and over and over again. And that's why representation matters. Someone said it's almost like a miracle drug. It absolutely is, considering that we've been told a lie for so long that the reason we're overweight is because of our behavior, when in fact our behavior is being caused by the fact that our body makes fat really well. And so that changes what the brain does, it changes the signals the brain gives off. And so like I said, it just starts a vicious cycle. How long can you use these drugs? For the rest of your life. Just like diabetes. For example, insulin is a toxic medication, and no one tells someone who needs insulin to stop taking it. These medications are far safer than even Tylenol, and we take Tylenol without thinking about it. If you take ibuprofen on an empty stomach, it's going to give you an ulcer, not even a question. If you take too much Tylenol, you will get liver failure, not even a question. These medications, only when misused, cause issues. They don't otherwise. If there's nothing predisposing you to some of the complications, then there's nothing. They're safe, and they don't have to be stopped. The key, though, is, I'm just going to add this as an aside, muscle will determine what happens later. The amount of muscle that somebody muscle can take over the metabolic process that the medications do. And so anyone who's on the medication, who's losing weight and who wants to come off them, the only way they can is if your muscle is able to take on the work. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a little bit of both, muscle plus less medicine or less frequently taken. What else? Let me see. Thank you so much. I love how you break down this information. It's so easy to understand. I appreciate that. And if you don't understand, always ask me questions. I don't mind explaining it a little bit better. The other thing, though, and ask how long you can use the medications. We generally don't ask that question about any other chronic disease medication. When someone's taking blood pressure medication, we don't ask them, how long can you take this? You take this as long as you have to control the disease. Obesity is a disease and it needs to be controlled with medication. Therefore, those medications are required to control that disease as long as that disease exists. Period. Do you have to take meds like Zepbound for life, even if healthy lifestyle is implemented? It depends on your genetics. It depends on how much of that lifestyle can take over from the medication. That's with any medication. If you're diabetic, if you have hypertension, if you have any other issue, any other chronic disease, doing whatever you can to not make that disease worse is helpful, but you can't always change your genes. In fact, you can't change your genes really other than make them worse. You can't really make them better. And so the best thing to do is to do the best you can with what you've got. And some people can use muscle to then never have to take anything else metabolically. And then there's other people like me. I can build muscle, but I still need something to help the rest of the way. Some of that was because of my age. Some of it's because of my strong genetics with diabetes, and some of it's because of menopause. And it was like I was fine until I got to a certain age and I just couldn't do it on my own anymore and I needed help. And that's the case with many people. It's the same with arthritis. It's the same with lots of different diseases. So Shirley asks, is this drug safe? Absolutely. When used properly, when prescribed properly, and when monitored correctly. What about Farxiga? Farxiga is what's called an SGLT2. What those are medications also for diabetes. They do help with regulating blood sugar. They don't cause as much weight loss as the GLP-1s, mainly because they are not as centrally active, meaning they don't act on the brain as much. And a lot of why GLP-1s work so well is because of the action they have on the brain, which helps regulate the rest of the body. But what Farxiga does do is it protects the kidneys from diabetes, from blood sugar dysregulation, which can cause, again, remember I talked about the inflammation to those little blood vessels, where the kidneys are very, very sensitive because they're full of blood vessels. That's how they work. They work by using very leaky blood vessels to get urine out and keep minerals in. That's how we regulate our sodium. It's how we regulate our potassium. It's how we regulate our water consumption and how we stay hydrated. Our kidneys work with all of that. And so Farxiga helps to prevent the damage that blood sugar will do on those small vessels. And so, yes, it's a good medication for blood sugar and metabolic protection, not as much for weight loss, but then if you need it to protect your kidneys, you need it to protect your kidneys. It's a wonderful medication for that, for diabetics. And see a lot of thank yous. Thank you for coming. And thank you. Yes, you're welcome for the information. And so how does the weight loss occur? So weight loss occurs when the process that creates, it's really not weight loss. It is fat loss. You can lose weight in the form of muscle, and you don't want that to happen. Muscle is a wonderful metabolic enhancer in the body, and so when you lose it, it affects your metabolism. We talk a lot about metabolism. Well, muscle is one of those things. The more you build, the better your metabolism gets. It's the same. So losing weight is not the issue. Losing fat is, and we lose fat by one, not feeding it. And when I say not feeding it, what that means is not eating, not because you eat too much. It's just because your body cannot regulate what it is that you do eat. Some people can eat a whole loaf of bread and doesn't do a thing to them. If I were to eat a loaf of bread, I would end up with a big swath of fat around my middle, because that's exactly what glucose dysregulation does. My body cannot regulate glucose very well. Definitely not on its own. And many people are like that. And that's what causes weight gain. So that's how, and so what it does, so how fat loss occurs is by stopping the process that feeds fat cells. And so what you do is you shift the need for fuel to muscle, and you stop the process that makes that not happen. And so that's how you lose weight. But, like I said, each cell has glucose receptors, and if your body can't use it, then you need medication to help your body use it. On average, how much should be lost? How much is too much? So, weight loss, it should be at most 1 to 2 pounds a week. So that way you know it is in fat, not in muscle and not in water. Too much is when you get to the point where you start getting weak. Too much is when it's not fat anymore and it's muscle happening. That is when it's too much. And for every single person, it's different. Some people, when they get to what's considered a normal BMI, feel weak. They feel tired. That's too much weight loss. They may need to be, because the more muscular you are, the higher your BMI is going to be. So it may not be within normal range for a healthy person. You look at many bodybuilders, their BMIs are off the chart. They don't have an ounce of fat on them, though. That doesn't mean they're healthy either, though. But, that's another story for another day. So let me see here. I have another one. It says, Dr. Toomer, I am really doing well. I joined a gym and now I have a trainer who works with me. We have been focusing on weightlifting and I'm thrilled. I want to tone my body. You have been great. Oh, thank you. Yes, body toning is a wonderful thing. It is always a healthy activity. Always, always, always. And what your body does depends on, again, your body will react based on your genetics. And so always add that, because it also helps with balance later. It helps with strength. It just helps with the quality of life. It helps you feel strong. So psychologically it works. It helps you not have to use as much effort to do activities. So of course you conserve some of your energy and can use it for other things. Muscle is always a wonderful, wonderful, muscle building is a wonderful thing for health. Okay. I hope this changes, that I've learned weight loss medications have around for a long time. Obesity is a serious matter that can have other health impacts, as you stated. Absolutely. Like I said, fat in our body does not like it for many reasons, mechanically because of our joints, but also chemically because of what it does to other cells in the body. And it just causes a lot of inflammation. And one of the things you'll see, even in like cardiac testing, we test for inflammatory markers because we know that inflammation of small vessels leads to heart attacks. And fat gives off those inflammatory chemicals that cause things to get inflamed. So of course, when you have extra fat, it's not just the actual physical fat around the organ that causes it not to act properly, but also the blood supply to that organ that gets affected as well. How do you determine if you have metabolic issues? Is it your blood work? Yes, there is a way. Now, there are many different types of metabolic issues, but when it comes to weight, when it comes to fat production, checking for a free insulin level, checking for what's called an A1C, which to see if somebody's blood sugars have been high, and then checking for blood sugars in and of themselves. I personally, as a physician, have always done them after someone's eaten. I prefer to see what happens to the body after it's been challenged by the most dangerous thing for somebody who has metabolic issues, and that's glucose. So you give someone a carbohydrate glucose challenge and see what their body does. You want to see what their blood sugar does. You want to see what your insulin levels do, because fasting doesn't tell us anything. Our body, and when fasting is at rest, it's at metabolic rest. And we want to see what happens when it's metabolically challenged. And so what's called a postprandial insulin, postprandial glucose, or what's called a glucose tolerance test. And glucose tolerance tests, there are many different types: 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. Any woman who's been pregnant knows that there's always a test at about 20 weeks when that's done to check for women for diabetes, because again, pregnancy is a metabolic process. And so diabetes expresses itself during that process. That's why we check for it during pregnancy. It can be in there lurking for lots of different reasons. Pregnancy can bring it out. Menopause can bring it out. Illness can bring it out. Weight gain can bring it out. Age can bring it out. But always there's a genetic undertone to all of it. Oh, okay. I'm just kind of going through the questions. When you've obtained your ideal weight or healthy BMI, can you stop taking it? It depends on the person. Everyone's different. If you're able to use muscle as a way to create a situation where the medication is no longer needed, then yes, you can come off it. If you are not able to because your genetics are too strong, I was able to for a little while. So when I was from like the age when I was on insulin was about 36. I lost some weight. I got my diabetes under control, lost weight, and kind of this nice cycle of weight loss, diabetes control, which caused more weight loss, which controlled my diabetes. And then I was able to maintain my blood sugars, maintain my weight, maintain everything on just diet. Actually, I couldn't exercise because of my heart condition at the time. And then as time went on, as I got older, it became harder and harder and harder for me to control my blood sugars. And so I needed to be put on medication. And so that happens it's everyone's different. But the key is not to blame yourself when it happens. It's just the luck of the draw. It's just the luck of the genetic draw. And you can't blame yourself for that. In fact, you can use it to your advantage if you want. And so having to take medication for any reason should not be no one should be shamed for having to take medication for any reason whatsoever. None. So I've learned that if you have difficulty accessing the medication due to the pharmacy being out of it, have your doctors request it by mail order. Yes, mail order makes it easier to get if your insurance will cover it. There are some very safe compound pharmacies also. And what compound pharmacies are pharmacies that make the generic form of the medications, and they can be very, very helpful, especially if this is a life-saving process. And if someone can't get access any other way, it's better to use a compound than to use nothing and let your body suffer. I trying to help my son get healthier, going to doctor with him currently at 336. What med would be the best to start with? He also is diabetic. Doctor wanted to do surgery. Son doesn't want surgery. Now, of course, this is for educational purposes only, and I can only give what my opinion is on these things. One, diabetics do not like surgery. Our skin does not. Diabetics have a difficult time healing, and also with diabetes, our body has a difficult time with our immune system, because blood sugar and fat also suppresses our immunity, unfortunately. So when you cut skin, you're basically increasing the risk of infection. So any way to avoid surgery when a diabetic, you always want to go that route first. When it comes to the medication, any medication that gets the diabetes under control is a good medication, except insulin. Insulin will control blood sugar, but it will also help promote fat production. So if there's a way to get diabetes under control with medication that's not insulin, that's the way to go. Any of the GLP-1s would work wonderfully for that, unless it's contraindicated. The only contraindication is if there's been a history of pancreatitis, if there's a history of thyroid cancer, of medullary thyroid cancer, which has only been seen in rats, has never been seen in humans based on the medication. And the other is gallstones. Now, when you lose weight very, very quickly, gallstones become more of an issue, and gallstones lead to pancreatitis. So you have to be very, very careful. If someone has gallstones, often what they'll do, even with gastric bypass surgery, they'll remove the gallbladder to prevent gallstones from forming, because when you lose weight rapidly, gallstones get formed. So really, any GLP-1, anything that will help control diabetes, and then muscle. Always start with a Go slow, start low, go slow, muscle building regimen. However you can, in a way that fits into your life and fits into your lifestyle, because that is in the long run is always going to help, and it will never hurt unless you go overboard and injure yourself. But like I said, start low, go slow, and slowly build. And with someone, and if you can, with someone who's an expert in knowing how to help people in various situations, because needing to lose 50 pounds is very different from needing to lose 150 pounds. Um, Biologically, physiologically, the process is the same, but psychosocially, it is very, very different. And so it's important to know that, to work with someone who really understands that. Can gout be treated without medication? Should focus on treating inflammation. Yes, gout can be treated. Once you have gout, gout flare up, it's very difficult to treat without medication. However, you can stop inflammation. There are certain foods that cause gout to be worse because it's a uric acid created process. And so if you avoid foods that create higher levels of uric acid in the body, kidney issues can also cause your body to hold on to more uric acid. So doing things that protect your kidneys is important. The other is, there are anti-inflammatory diets. There are diets that help, turmeric. We know turmeric helps to reduce inflammation. We know that refined sugars and flours and white, rice and all that increase inflammation. And so really, yes, focusing on preventing inflammation is important. And fat cells are one of those things you want to prevent because it does cause inflammation as well. What are your views on Zepbound, which is being offered by my physician? If you need it, take it. Listen to your doctors. I mean, people don't just give out these medications for no reason. Zepbound is the best of the GLP-1s. It's the top of the line now, as of right now. There are others coming, but Zepbound is definitely, especially if stress contributes to weight gain. There's a secondary component in Zepbound that allows for cortisol to not cause as much damage. Is a keto diet healthy? No. And it's not sustainable. And it's not natural. The best way to eat is a natural way of eating based on how our just clean, complete meals, which are protein centered, but they don't have to be all protein. Ketogenic diets, yes, do cause some weight loss, but mainly because you're not feeding fat cells anymore. So your body goes after those fat cells to give your body what it needs in order for the rest of your body functions to happen. And so, but it's better, again, ketogenic diets, you can create what's called a pseudo ketogenic diet. And this is what I tell people. You can, they say ketogenic diets are, you're supposed to eat 20% carbs or less. Well, you can create 20% either by dropping one thing and making it 20%, or by adding a whole bunch of other stuff and making it 20%. So if you eat a cup of rice and you eat 3 cups of meat and vegetables, then you've dropped that carb to 25%, as opposed to dropping it to a tablespoon of rice and then having all this other stuff around it. You get to eat more and get the same result. Let me see. Oh, someone just tagging a lot of their friends. I appreciate that. Is Trulicity a good drug for type 2 diabetes? Yes, it is a GLP-1. It's one of the earlier versions of GLP-1. It works very, very well. It was the first weekly one that came out. And it's still is very good. GLP-1s are wonderful diabetic medications. Some drug manufacturers offer significant discounts for those who have a pay high cost. You can look them up online and apply. Yes, there are some. Yes, both Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk have discount savings account. You just have to go in and apply for them. If you have insurance that covers, and they don't cover all of it, it will give you some sort of a discount, and it can be anywhere from $25 to $550 if they give any at all. And that's for commercial insurance. My doctor prescribed the medication, but I can't get it from my pharmacy. Then find another pharmacy. It's out there. There's online pharmacies like Amazon Pharmacy. You can go directly to the pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and see what they have. I think it's Eli Lilly Direct. There are other ways of getting it, but I wouldn't sit back and be passive about it. If you need the medication and you want the medication, you're going to have to put in some work. No physician right now has time to put in the work that's necessary to get medication for everyone who needs it and see patients at the same time. So just put some legwork in. Let me see. Should switch from Mounjaro to Zepbound if I have had a lot of inflammatory process going on. Mounjaro and Zepbound are the exact same medication. They're both tirzepatide. And the only difference is Mounjaro is assigned diabetes and Zepbound for obesity. But they're exactly the same medicine. Same doses, same everything, just a different name. Made by even by the same people, same person, Eli Lilly. So, well, we've almost hit an hour. I like to keep these under an hour. This is probably the longest I've had one. So if you have any other questions, now also the other place you can find me, I do have a group, facebook.com/group/total weight loss. And if it's the actual name of the group is Total Wellness and Plus Weight, Total Wellness Plus Weight Care. Even if you're busy, tired, and changing with time, you can actually join that group and ask me questions in the group. That's a better place because if you send me messages in Messenger, they get lost sometimes. But the groups I always monitor, and so that's the best way of doing it. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining me. This has been a really good discussion. The questions have been excellent. And so again, next week I won't be live. At least I'll try to be, but I'm going to be in a different time zone. I'm going to see if I can figure it out. And if I can, I will have a video ready to post at the same time. So that way there's something that you'll learn from, and then you can send me the questions afterwards. So again, good night. It's Dr. Tumor Talk Show, and I will see you every Tuesday right here, blackdoctor.org, on YouTube, Facebook, or on my Facebook and YouTube, which is Dr. Tumor. Oh, so what is the name of the group again? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write it in the chat. So it's facebook.com/groups/total weight loss. So that is the name that's the group. Oh, thank you. Oh, that was me actually. I was like, oh, someone else did it for me. No, it's just me coming up 3 times. So that's it. So if you join there and you can ask questions in the group itself, and I will see them and I will do my best to answer them. All right. So have a good evening, and I will see you at Dr. Tumor Talks on Tuesday. Good night.